So, I have two fine gentlemen of Cattle Decapitation with me. How are you guys?
Good.
I wanted to get straight into things. So, let's talk Death Atlas. So, I wanted to know, is Death Atlas, is that a representation of like Atlas holding up death? Or is it like an atlas in terms of an encyclopedia of death?
I think that's a good question that you're trying to draw the distinction. I think it's mostly, I wanted it to be have this kind of like planetary vibe and global sort of vibe without being, space themed or some shit, not like that. But, and I'm a big fan of globes and atlases and maps and stuff. Really, the idea just kind of came off of an image that I had made by somebody else, and it basically gave me the idea to call it Death Atlas. Not so much about the Greek mythos or anything. That's just it's sort of like a visual play on words that I do often in the lyrics and stuff.
I also wanted to address the fact that Cattle Decapitation albums have never really been the most positive of outlooks. But even by your standards, I feel like this is the most bleak yet.
Yeah. I personally wanted it to be darker. Not like dark, we need to make it darker than the last one. I just want to I personally like darker music. I think we all kind of...
We came to that sort of agreement early on.
Yeah.
Very early on when we were kind of loosely planning what we wanted the record to be, theme-wise and just musically and everything. It was just,
pissed.
Yeah.
But, and angry, but still having emotional peaks and valleys. Yeah.
Still despondent.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it still has to be Cattle Decapitation, which was founded as a very frantic, intense sounding sound.
I find it interesting as well because obviously, given the current state of the world, climate change is obviously a massive issue. Do you think that, songs like that are on Death Atlas will actually bring about change in people who are listening to it?
Probably not.
It's going to be a reaction where people are going to stop. Hopefully they'll continue listening, regardless. But they're going to be turned off by it's the don't tell me what to think.
Yeah, people don't like to be preached to.
Yeah, and I don't think it's like you don't present things in a preaching manner. It's at all. So, but there's people who are going to have a predisposed notion about how we're trying to deliver it. Because there's people that you come across occasionally that were really surprised about. Oh, I didn't know you were that type of band. Like they didn't even notice like put together the imagery or put together his lyrics with and just like, oh, I just listened for the blast, man, or whatever, the brutality of the music and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know. As far as changing anyone's opinion or enlightening, I'm sure that'll happen to a certain extent, but I don't think it's going to be a massive.
Personally, I'm the guy that writes the lyrics, and I've always seen. I was inspired by bands that, they were just talking about something. You have to talk about something. You know what I mean? I don't think they were really rallying too much for change or anything. If you're trying to get across an important message, extreme metal.
Yeah, you're trying to.
It's not.
It's not the best way to do it. Someone not wanting to hear anything about, environmental issues or whatever. A lot of it comes back to governmental politics, and then there's so many people. It's so polarized out there right now. And people violently taking sides that I feel like maybe this message or what we're talking about ends up, getting lost in that shuffle as well, which is unfortunate for the music. But, I do think people generally out there have the wrong idea about this band, but it's nothing, it's no fault of ours. We've always been as honest as possible in interviews and stuff, but people like to put words in people's mouths.
Start today.
let's talk about, in terms of the actual music on the album. So I've always been intrigued about, the kind of final section of an album. I feel like you've always got this sort of Deus Ex Machina. So where was that kind of inspired from, to have the intro and then that massive final track?
Big outro.
Fucking Harvest Floor
Yeah, I think that was the first one when we tried.
with Jarbo.
What was the reasoning behind it? Like, why did you guys want to kind of do that?
I don't know if this was the reason. Like, I can't put that on anyone else, but everyone's mind. Oh, how did Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets, and you know what I mean? There was like, here's this big emotional thing, and here's the Ripper outro, this sort of stuff. I mean, whether that plays into any of it, I don't know. But I think subconsciously, if you came up in that time period,
Totally.
that structure, how you structure albums, really stuck with you.
I've always, I think, gravitated towards things like that. It's an actual conclusion, instead of just a bunch of songs put together. It didn't dawn on me until, I guess, Harvest Floor, when we got Dave in there, and things were changing, that I realized I might be able to do some of this stuff that I would like to do, whether it be like singy kind of vocals or melodic stuff or whatever, or have actual emotion put into something like Cattle Decapitation. But we did it slowly with like Harvest Floor, and then Monolith, I think, was took a headfirst dive into much more melodic songs, much more melodic riffs, which allowed me to bring melodic vocals into it, because the music's all done first, and then I'm basically reacting to what I'm being given. But you start thinking in that mindset, and then that was like the first record where I do remember the album flow being a little more forward. Whereas on Harvest Floor, we didn't realize until, I think, like Jarbo sent us her tracks and stuff, that we could really turn this into a more of an epic intro to an
it became to structure because of not working around her part, but like taking that into consideration and then setting it up that way. Like the albums previous, it was almost like started, super grindy the first few records, and then, Humor and Karma or whatever, basically going, oh, we know how to write grind songs, let's put 2 or 3 of those together, and now it's a 4.5 minute song. Yeah. So we're like, what's going on? Even though it's only a 4-minute song, it seemed like an 8-minute song. There's like so much going on.
Probably around a Harvest Floor, I think we started structuring albums like almost like a book, where it's got the foreword, or it's got like an intro.
Absolutely.
And then the first song, the first chapter has this totally separate vibe that has a very, like a Genesis. This is a beginning of something. Yeah. And then the last song and the last couple songs have had more of like a closer, like a closing out of an idea. The albums thematically have always been loosely done. It's not like King Diamond or some shit, or Iron Maiden or whatever, where we're like, oh, it's
every song is a chapter.
Yeah, we tell the story.
Oh, right. Okay.
But like structuring the album like that, I see huge value in that. And this album, I think, is very exemplary of that, because the ending, like the last 20 minutes of it, are very emotional and have all the peaks and valleys that I personally love about the record. This is like one of the first records where I can really stand back and say to myself, like, I'd be a fan of this, if I wasn't. I've always found it kind of hard to step outside and look inside and be like, but would I be a passerby and like being into it? I just don't know. I haven't been able to make that disconnect. I don't know. I'm just really fucking happy with it, and there's a lot of beautiful and super crushing parts as well. There's some intense sections where you're just getting beat down by brutality or whatever, but there's really emotional parts in there as well. And I think that I hope that it will resonate with fans, but like I think it will just out of the sheer fact that it seems like that's how a lot of people are wired nowadays. There's a lot of people on SSRIs or a lot of people with anxiety, depression, and I don't know why that seems to be. Or I think it's maybe just being more of a recognized thing as time goes on and science progresses. But it's a very emotional record, and a lot of that came, I think, from playing European festivals and seeing people actually crying out in the front.
Really? Crying?
Yeah. To cattle together. But I think that's
stuff like that.
That's my favorite reaction that I've ever seen to our music or anything.
Yeah.
Because it's you can't fake that. That's for real, unless you're just that emotionally unstable. Which then I totally I totally get it too. This is probably the record for you.
Thank you so much for having a chat, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.